Dr. Koth said. I was going to see, you know, there's a phrase about, when we're talking about mediation, a phrase about bargaining in the shadow of the law. In other words, you know what your legal position is, and you're sorting out your problems in that context. I'm wondering how far AJS is carried out in bargaining, in mediation, in the shadow of the Constitution. And in a sense, what's that Dr. Koth was saying? That's really important, that Article, particularly Article 10, should be a guiding light for all of us, really, including AJS. It does leave me, and I would be very interested to hear what people say, what is it among the existing things that could be realistically scaled up to answer IDRC's question? And one of the things that also I think it's important to remember is how many people go to chiefs to get their questions dealt with. Very prominent in the HIAL, in our study, they very prominent. And then I realized, when I was in the constitution-making days, I was trying to understand provincial administration. And I unearthed on the internet an exam paper for provincial administration. And it became obvious to me that they were, in fact, expected to be a resource of knowledge. For example, the question was, there was a question about business enterprises, you know, the distinctions between a partnership, a company, and a sole business, and one or two questions about matrimonial relations. And then that made me realize, yes, obviously, people are supposed to be equipped, actually, to deal with people's questions. Something that's always bugged me. What is it about the court system, which as a lawyer, after all, one was, you know, brought up on, and what is it about the court system that fails people? And what can the court system learn for its own proceedings? Now, Justice Ongudi suggested, you know, incorporation of AJS into the court structures. I would wonder if there are also other things. Is there something about the way courts operate that could be changed to make it more user-friendly for people? Secondly, in the same vein, what about the legal profession? I didn't hear, was I wrong? There's nobody from the Law Society of Kenya here? Maybe somebody. So, in other words, lawyers are the first place you go to if you are aware, if you've got the money and you're aware that you've got a legal dispute. What can the legal profession do to improve access to justice for Kenyans? I wonder sometimes whether there are cases in which people need an authoritative ruling which they might not get through alternative justice systems. I'm thinking particularly of land. I think there are a lot of people in this country who, I know people who say, we actually just had to give up on this piece of land because there was no way we could prove that it actually belonged to our family. You may settle agreements, but you know, somebody dies and nobody goes through the probate process. The land doesn't get transferred to anybody formally, and yet the next generation sells it to somebody else. I actually know somebody who killed themselves, and obviously there was a mental disturbance there. But one of the precipitating factors was the difficulty of dealing with the question of acquisition of land, which had actually, I think, last belonged to like the grandfather of the people who had actually transferred the land to him notionally. Then I was thinking about history. We, I think, would those of us who are keen on the Constitution would think of the Constitution as being a unifying factor in the country. And I was wondering whether also courts, in a sense, courts are a type of national system and should be, in a way, a unifying factor. One of the early English kings, Henry II, undoubtedly to boost royal privileges, improve the system of justice. But it could also be something that is good for unifying the nation. And just two other quick points. There's a lot of research on what has happened in various African countries, particularly, during the colonial period to traditional justice institutions. I know of work on Senegal, for example, and on Malawi. When they become part of the state system, first the colonial system, but then later the independent system, actually they're no longer traditional. What is the impact of an involvement of public institutions, official institutions, in alternative justice systems? And does it matter? Maybe it doesn't. If they're acceptable, more acceptable, then it may not matter that they're not as traditional as they were. And a final thought I had, the question of the variety, the different ways in which people can get their disputes. Is that a weakness, or is it in some ways a strength? And how do we, if it's a strength, how do we recognize it and support it and yet improve it if that's what needed? Thank you very much indeed.
Makofi kwa Professor Jill tena. Asante. Professor Jill Cottrell is a very, very ardent supporter of the AJS, and we are really grateful to have her on board. Now, we have come to the close of the opening session, and I want to really thank you for your kind audience. You've been very, very good participants, and we are grateful for that.
Mtazamaji, moja kwa moja basi, kama vile ambavyo umeweza kushuhudia, ni mnenaji baada ya mwingine ambao wamekuwa wakifanya tu yao ya utangulizi hili ambalo tayari limeshang'oa nanga katika mojawapo ya ukumbi katika kitivo cha masuala ama mafunzo ya sheria katika chuo hiki kikuu cha Kabarak. Na kama ndio unaungana pamoja nasi kwa mara ya kwanza kabisa, kumbuka ni kongamano kuhusiana na mbinu ama njia mbadala za kuweza kupatiana ama kuweza kupata haki kwa jamii, kwa kimombo wanasema alternative justice systems. Na kongamano hili limeng'oa nanga rasmi siku ya leo katika kaunti ya Nakuru katika chuo hiki kikuu cha Kabarak, na linatarajiwa kuweza kuendelea mpaka siku ya Ijumaa. Na wale ambao wameweza kuzungumza siku ya leo, tumekuwa na naibu gavana katika kaunti ya Nakuru ambaye ameweza kumwakilisha gavana wa Nakuru, Mheshimiwa Susan David Kones, ambaye ni naibu gavana, ameweza kufungua rasmi kongamano hili. Jaji ambaye vile vile ndio mwenyekiti wa mchakato mzima na vile vile kamati ambayo inaendesha masuala kuhusiana na njia mbadala za upatianaji wa haki, ambaye ni Jaji Profesa Joel Ngugi, ambaye vile vile ameweza kuzungumza na katika mazungumzo yake ameweza kuelezea vizuri zaidi vile ambavyo mchakato mzima wa AJS ama justice system ulivyo muhimu katika jamii. Wameweza kusisitiza vile ambavyo inakuwa ni rahisi sana na inakuwa na ufanisi mkubwa sana wakati ambapo jamii wanazungumza pamoja, wakati ambapo jamii wanapatana pamoja, wakati ambapo jamii wanasemezana, wakati ambapo labda kumekuwa na mgogoro, wakati ambapo labda kumekuwa na hatia ambayo imeweza kutokea, ama kuna kosa ambayo imeweza kufanywa. Wameweza kuainisha vizuri na kuweza kuelezea vizuri vile ambavyo utumiaji wa mchakato huu ulivyo na manufaa mengi, ulivyo na faida ya kemkem, wakati ambapo tunalinganisha na wakati ambapo kesi inapelekwa mahakamani. Na kumekuwa na wananaji wengine ambao vile vile katika kaunti ya Nakuru katika mahakama Gugudi, ambaye vile vile ameweza kuelezea vile ambavyo mtindo huu na vile ambavyo mchakato huu unavyowasaidia wakazi, na vile vile hata akatoa wito ya kwamba ni vizuri kwa umma, ni vizuri kwa wananchi kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba wakati ambapo majaji mbalimbali wanaangazia kesi kesi tofauti kuhakikisha kwamba wameweza kutumia mchakato huu. Na mtazamaji, ni baadhi tu ya masuala ambayo yameweza kujitokeza, ishara tosha kwamba katika siku 4 zijazo bila shaka kutakuwa na utajiri mkubwa sana shauri mawaidha ya mtindo huu. Letea mengi, lakini shukrani sana MBCI Chuo Kikuu Kabarak kwa niaba ya kikosi kizima ambacho kinahakikisha upeperushaji huu umefaulu. Jina langu ni Mangicho.
SOZO TV. Look, live and be whole.